After spending a weekend with Tai Lopez and various different multi-millionaires running finance and marketing companies, here are the top 3 things that I actually learned that allowed them to go out there and actually create the success. And this isn't going to be, the typical thing you hear. And in fact, every single point pretty much surprised me to after actually being able to be invited to these masterminds after having a certain level of success with my companies. Now, with that said, let's go into it. Now, point number 1 is knowing your genetics. Now, basically, this was something that just made so much sense, but I'd never hear many people speaking about it. And so Tai basically broke down the fact that your genetics, it can be your number 1 strength and it can also be your number 1 weakness, right? And so knowing how to use your genetics as your strength in order to get what you want is arguably the most important thing. And the biggest mistake people make is they try to follow or copy, or let's rather say they try to fit into society that maybe dictates what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, and when they should be doing it, right? And a lot of this programming actually makes it much more difficult with people that have genetics that don't support that to actually go out there and succeed. So let's say, for example, you have a certain, type of genetics that have never really been wired for entrepreneurship. You probably have a much more difficult time launching various different businesses. And so therefore, you'd probably want to go for something where your strength actually lies. Because at the end of the day, when you compete with someone who has these genetics around this specific thing, right? It'll be much harder for you to compete. And this is something that just makes a lot of sense, right? So what I'd highly recommend for you is to kind of understand what type of person you are. Some people are super high dopamine people, and these tend to a lot of the times be entrepreneurs, athletes, people that endure and get a lot of happiness from very intense, very high excitement type of stuff. Or you might be someone with lower dopamine and you might want more stability, more control, and less moving things going around. So just knowing your genetics is one of the easiest ways for you to be able to understand what you will always have an advantage with over other people. And for every weakness, there is always a strength. Okay, this is really crucial. A story I really like actually was one of the entrepreneurs who was doing crazy numbers, over $1 million a month. One of the things is that back then in the day, he was actually telling his story. He was a drug addict. And so he was obsessed with kind of getting this high and being like, bigger than the world. And so that was a massive flaw because he almost lost his life through doing that. Now, he used that same, innate type of genetic, that feeling that he had inside of him to actually create a business that is extremely it's a very business that requires a lot of movement, but at the same time, that high, he still gets it out of the business, except rather than the drugs. So it's very interesting because he turned his life by still using the same thing that's always been inside of him. As I said previously, right? For every weakness, there is at least a strength, and knowing your genetics is one of the easiest ways to understand what is the best path for me based on the type of person I am, because you will absolutely destroy other people with your strengths. Okay. Now, the second thing is the integrated good life. Now, this one I think is so crucial. And I believe right now, and this was a massive game changer for me, is that most people, a lot of people think in extremes, right? So they're like, hey, it's either this or it's that. And a lot of people have a hard time kind of finding the middle point or that balance point, right? And so one of the things which I know, Tai mentions a lot is he basically says that you want to have a 7 out of 10 for health, wealth, and relationships. And you don't really need to constantly seek to have a 10 out of 10. You just need to always integrate all parts of your life better, right? And so what does he mean by that? So for example, for him, a massive part is, because he has a family, is that he would actually go out there with his kids, right? And essentially, whenever he went for walks with them, whatever, he would take some business meetings, right? Now, of course, not completely neglecting the situation, but he would literally, while running, be listening to voice notes from his business partners, or while being on vacation, working a little bit, or while doing this. And he basically defines it as being the integrated good life, mixing things all the time. So if you're someone who's also now working 24/7 in the office, well, you'll actually realize that your happiness will probably go up if you mix that working with some form of being in nature, whatever it is, and not necessarily having them always in the 2 different extremes, right? And so what's crazy for me, right, is that sometimes whenever I go for dinners, or I have some time with friends or whatever, I always kind of want to be working on my business at a simple level. Like even if I'm like enjoying a little bit of free time, like I still want to work on my business at a somewhat level. And so sometimes when I'm out with friends or whatever, like I'm still on my phone, like answering a few things. Of course, as I said, you don't want to now completely work, but a little bit kind of here and there, a little bit kind of here and there. And I think that's one massive thing, which is kind of like society, in my view, also kind of frames us to always think in left and right and always one or the other, right? And so I think that's one massive thing is like, hey, if you're working, integrated, right? Like integrated with being outdoors, integrated with, let's say, being at the gym. You don't have to work between always, I know a lot of you guys have jobs, but you don't have to always work exactly always fixed 9 to 5, right? You can also kind of do a little bit here, a little bit there while mixing it with other things. And so the integrated good life was one massive thing, which for me has changed the game, because now I go, let's say, for a weekend away, and I'm away, I'm relaxing, and then I'm also doing a little bit of work, a little bit of this, and I've actually realized my happiness is so much better, right? Now, this leads me now to my last thing, which is thick markets, okay? Now, essentially, if you're someone who wants to find your dream partner, because I truly believe that having a dream partner is this person will help you like elevate to higher levels of performance, right? And so it's actually quite interesting because he spoke a lot about the best ways to find your dream partner, okay? And he basically explains the whole concept of thick markets, and this is actually proven, right? It's not just coming from the word of someone where it's like there's no facts or statistics behind it. And so thick markets basically comes down to wherever you live, city, location, right, will determine how much more difficult or how much easier it is, right? And where you hang out, it is to find your dream partner. And that's very, very important, because the goal of you finding your dream partner, at the end of the day, no one can really control when you do find that, right? But you can play an odds game, probability, and it's actually been proven that the more you are in a thick market, the more likely you are to find your dream partner. And so therefore, you got to audit yourself. And there's this personality test on lifecompass.com that basically you can analyze yourself, analyze parts about your personality and who might be a potential fit. And then the goal is to actually figure out, where do these people spend the most time, right? City, location, place, and you will likely actually find your dream partner more in these places than you will actually in your own. And that's basically called a thick market, a market where there's a higher probability of you actually finding the person you want to find, okay? Which is very, very interesting. I find that quite unique. Now, guys, these are the top 3 things that I kind of took away as very unique nuggets that I got. Of course, there was so much more business insights, so many more things that I kind of learned that these guys think about life. But I will tell you one thing is that if I can give you one answer, is every single person that was there, their background and their story was always somehow being a little bit like not fitting in, being left out. I mean, the people that were there were like dropouts, people who never really fitted in, people who were bullied. I'm not saying it's like this was always the case, but many of them struggled to fit into the normal way, okay? And this is one thing I saw in everyone. There was no one person where I saw this person was just always fitting in, everything was perfect based on their story, right? And so I remember, because we went around the room with everyone and we kind of broke down, our journeys and how we got to where we are. And I'll tell you now that in normal society, everyone would have either been viewed as a failure, weird, strange, or something along those lines, right? And I think that people that don't fit in have a massive competitive advantage. And that is the fact that when you don't fit in, right, naturally as a human, you're going to want to fit in, or you're going to want to become the best. And you basically have 2 choices. Don't fit in, feel like an outcast, be depressed, or ask yourself, hey, how can I become, how can I make this weirdness my advantage, right? And a lot of them actually have done that and absolutely crushed it, right? And so one thing I'll tell you guys is, if you struggle to feel comfortable, if you struggle to feel, there's a book I always recommend, Reality Transurfing, and it speaks about listening to your soul, right? Your mind can only, give some logical justification. But if inside your soul, you feel like, oh no, I don't feel happy with where I am, then that is a sign of a change that needs to happen, right? And second to that, if you can clearly not fit into something, trust me, it can be something that you see as negative or other people see as, but it can also be the thing that makes you a millionaire. All right, guys, with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Good luck. Almost forgot there. Good luck, and I hope to one day see you on the beaches of the world.